Shift work refers to any kind of work that doesn't happen on a 9-to-5 schedule. And about 15% of the workforce of the United States could be classified as shift work. Most shift workers are in service industries like police work or healthcare or the hospitality industry or firefighters or pharmacies. Shift work can also include early morning shifts, evening shifts, or night shifts, or rotating shifts that are constantly changing. And shift work presents some unique challenges to health. Hi, my name is John Immel, and I'm the director of the Joyful Belly School of Ayurveda. And this talk is sponsored by the Fundamentals of Ayurvedic Medicine Ayurveda certification course. The reason, and most basic reason, why shift work is unhealthy is because it works against your natural biorhythms. And that creates friction between your internal clock and the natural world. So your body is sending you signals that are contrary to the schedule and lifestyle that you're choosing, or that's chosen for you. So an example of that is needing to sleep, but you feel awake because the sun is out. What ends up happening to most shift workers is sleep deprivation. Studies show that on average, shift workers sleep 1 to 4 hours less than non-shift workers. That 2/3 of shift workers report excessive sleepiness. 30% of shift workers say they only get a good night's sleep once a month. So there's a name for a kind of sleep disorder that is associated with shift work. It's called shift work sleep disorder, or SWSD. Here are some symptoms. A person with SWSD may have difficulty sleeping or insomnia, or difficulty concentrating and focusing. They might get headaches or feel a lack of energy. That sounds familiar to people who generally don't sleep well. About 25 to 30% of people who are on shift work report symptoms of SWSD. And this impacts their quality of life. It impacts job satisfaction. It impacts performance of work. It impacts mental health, and especially driving safety. People who have SWSD or who do shift work generally are more likely to experience ulcers, absenteeism, depression, and have issues and problems with family, friends, and social activity. Remember, you're on a totally different schedule than most of the other people in your community. One of the things that people with SWSD report is microsleep, which is that fleeting, uncontrollable, brief episode of sleep. It can last a fraction of a second up to 10 full seconds. It can and it typically occurs when you're trying to fight sleep or trying to remain awake. And the peak frequency for people getting microsleep episodes is dawn, late at night, and also mid-afternoon. I remember my dad telling me, my dad is a police officer who used to work shift work before he retired, and he said that the hardest time was when he'd be driving in mid-afternoon with that warm sun on your body and through the window of the car, and it just makes you want to fall asleep. So those are times to be particularly careful. SWSD leads to hazardous driving for many people. 20% of car crashes in the U.S. are caused by driver fatigue. Nurses working night shifts are 4 times more likely to be involved in a fatigued driving accident than nurses on the day shift. I remember once I went camping and I didn't sleep that well. We were camping at the beach. So I had an episode of microsleep while I was driving home the next morning, and I swerved into oncoming traffic while going around a turn, and I woke up just in time, swerved back into my lane, and avoided that head-on collision. So shift work generally makes you less resilient to stress. You might be more jittery or more shaky. You might notice pain or be more emotional or have impaired memory. The long-term consequence of shift work is that it becomes hard for the person to maintain any kind of routine. Even after transitioning to normal work hours, many of those who used to do shift work experience trouble with sleep for years after. Shift work affects mental health. It can cause mood disorders, anxiety, depression, and irritability. It can create issues focusing. And as I mentioned earlier, it can be hard to maintain social relationships. People who do shift work have a 57% higher divorce rate. When you're working on shift work, it's like your work controls you, and work becomes the center of your life. And that's hard. People who are on shift work have higher heart attacks and have more frequent cardiovascular disease. It's connected to a 4% increase in risk of stroke for every 5 years worked. Rotating shift workers are 30% more likely to have increased cholesterol and hypertension. They're more likely to have metabolic syndrome and obesity. They're more likely to have dyslipidemia or imbalanced fat levels in the blood. They're more likely to have diarrhea, pain, or constipation. More likely to have IBS and colorectal cancer. All right, so what are some of the common self-medicated bad remedies or really ends up being bad habits for shift workers? You know, people trying to get through the day, just trying to make it, and so they're just reaching for something quick that can help them, either sleep better or get up, and that leads to some common bad habits, such as lots of caffeine consumption, or reaching for convenience foods that end up being heavy, oily, or processed. Maybe that's why people who have shift work report higher levels of cholesterol. A person might take a nightcap at the end of the day as a sedative to help them get to sleep. Or they might have excessive sleeping on the days that they're off, just to catch up. Here's some examples of shift work schedule. A person might be working the day shift, which is 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. That's relatively normal. But then they might shift into the evening shift, which is 4 p.m. to midnight. And then perhaps the graveyard shift, which is midnight to 8 a.m. At CVS and Walgreens, many of the employees' schedules are changing each week. And so people don't know their schedule in advance, and they can never really plan events in advance because they don't know what their schedule is going to be. And that can lead to a social justice issue. Right? People have to plan their life around work instead of being able to schedule things with other people because they don't know their schedule. I have some friends like that, and it's challenging. Nurses might work the early shift, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., or the late shift, 1 p.m. to 9 p.m., or the night shift, 9 a.m. to 7 a.m. Hotel workers may be on a very different schedule. If there's, or if in the hospitality industry or in restaurants, may be working until 2 a.m. before the kitchen is cleaned. Long-haul truck drivers can often drive for days at a time and then only taking time to rest when it's convenient, and often getting less than 6 hours of sleep. So I've talked about some of the disorders that can come up from shift work. I've talked about some common shift work schedules. What is what are some what's the pathogenesis Ayurvedically behind some of these disorders? Well, it turns out shift work can have a similar effect as jet lag, that it causes vata in the liver, nervous, and digestive system, that biorhythms are disrupted, and that can cause hormonal imbalances, especially in melatonin levels, which we'll talk about. So all of this high vata in the nervous system, liver, and digestive system, due to a poor routine, can cause high vata, jitters, and low agni, or low digestive fire. There are two types of shift work, and they are unique. One type of shift work is regularly abnormal, where schedule changes are predictable, and then others are irregularly abnormal, where schedule changes are unpredictable. And irregularly irregular or irregularly abnormal is worse than regularly abnormal, because you can get your body on an unnatural routine, but if it's unnatural and no routine, that's worse. So rotating shifts create a continuous state of surprise on the body, and that's much tougher on the system, because you and your body can't find a pattern or rhythm or even a hormonal, when to secrete the right hormones and melatonin and all that. So it puts your body in a really big state of disarray. It's like a permanent state of jet lag. So first of all, when you're thinking about treating shift work, you want to keep as many things regular as possible. So whatever you can keep regular, it's important to keep those things regular. That might mean eating at the same time each day, right? You may, your schedule may change, but if you can plan breakfast every day at 8 a.m., that might be helpful, and at least you can tie down one thing. To help your nervous system, gentle stretching is always important throughout the day. And we see here a person who's lying on their bed in the middle of the day, a situation that shift workers find themselves in frequently. You also want to use light strategically. So this person there is lying on their bed taking a nap, but the shades are up and there's ample sunlight. So that's going to make her body feel like waking up, because light has an effect on your state of being because of a hormone called melatonin. When it's dark, your body secretes melatonin, and that makes you feel sleepy. When it's light, your body decreases melatonin, and that makes you wake up. So melatonin is naturally produced a couple of hours before bedtime, and then it decreases towards morning and stays at a low level throughout the day. When you're on shift work, the melatonin levels are altered or repressed. And so even if you got 8 hours of sleep, it's not going to be the same kind of sleep. When you're sleeping in full sunlight, your sleep is going to be light and fitful. All right, so given these facts, we can use the impact of light on our body strategically. In other words, get some natural sun exposure at the beginning of your night shift. Suppose you work night shift and you sleep during the day. Well, if you go to work at around dusk when it's getting dark, what you want to do is maybe go outside when you wake up an hour before you leave for work, when the sun is still up, and get some natural light. And that's going to wake up your body. And then when you go to work, you're inside and the lights are on, and your body's going to feel like it's the start of the day. Same thing when you're coming home from work. Even if you're coming home from work at dawn, what you want to do is try to avoid as much sunlight exposure on your trip home in the morning, and then go right into the house and close the shades, make it dark, and your body will think it's nighttime. And that will help you switch into, that'll help you avoid switching into daytime mode and help switch you into nighttime mode. If natural light is not available, you can get a light box and make it bright when you want to trigger that daytime feeling and start dimming it when you're getting ready for sleep. So you want to train your system for bedtime, no matter what time of day that actually is. And if possible, try to sleep at the same time every day. If that's not possible for you, try to follow the same routine as best as you. Try to follow the same winding down routine, so you give your body a clear signal that it's time to rest. Don't work more than 5 night shifts in a row without a break. So, and if you're working extended shifts, like 12-hour night shifts, limit that to 4 nights in a row. Try to avoid long commutes, because that's when you'll have more chances of getting those micro sleep accidents, car accidents, and you'll also, the sunlight on the ride home can wake up your body. Also, when you're trying to sleep, and also a long commute could leave you less time for rest. What about some herb and diet remedies? Aromatic herbs are particularly helpful. Aromatic herbs could include an herb like tulsi or even mint. Aromatic herbs relax smooth muscle tissue, and they're nervines that relax your nervous system as well. I can also think of herbs like Shankapushpi, which is an Ayurvedic herb, Shankhapushpi, Shankapushpi, which can help relax you. Any of your more sedative type herbs can also help relax you. Tagar, Tagar, or even nutmeg. But anyway, those aromatic herbs, herbs that have a strong aroma, are nervines and relax smooth muscle tissue, which can make you feel relaxed. They're also, you can also have foods that are soothing, mild liver tonics and cleansers, like applesauce, blueberries, beets, butternut squash, and sweet potatoes are all foods that are just generally mild liver tonics. A nap followed by a small bit of coffee can be very effective and in remaining alert. But I want to caution you against overusing caffeine, because that will also aggravate vata. Taking a melatonin supplement at the end of your work shift can help inform your body it's time to wind down and get to sleep. Also, if you had a bad night's sleep, or you're feeling jittery, or those high vata symptoms, or your digestion is off, eat easy to digest foods. In general, that will be supportive for your system. All right, what should a person who's working the graveyard shift do? Well, if on the days that you're working the graveyard shift, you might be coming home at 8 a.m. Well, then have a meal at 8:30 a.m., about a half an hour after you get home, just before bed. And then on days when you're off and not working the graveyard shift, you can have a meal at 7:30 a.m. And that way, you're having a meal roughly around the same time each day in the morning. And same thing when for lunch, if you're off and not working, have your lunch at 12 p.m. If you are on the graveyard shift, have lunch when you wake up. If you, and for dinner, have your dinner at 6 p.m. on days when you're off, and just before work when you are on the graveyard shift. So in other words, if your graveyard shift starts at midnight, maybe you'll have your meal at 10 p.m., something like that. If you're working an evening shift instead of a graveyard shift, you can have your dinner at 3:30 p.m. If that's too close to lunch, then you can take a break later on at night in your evening shift for dinner. All right. So, if you, for your sleep, if you are on the graveyard shift, take a nap when you come home from working the graveyard shift, and then it's likely that you'll wake up because it's the middle of the day. So maybe you'll come home at 8 a.m., have a little meal, get to sleep by 8:45 a.m. in the morning, and then your body might naturally wake up by noon or 1 p.m. Well, then you'll stay awake until around 7 p.m. and then go back to bed and wake up just before going to work, and that way you'll be refreshed during the night. On days when you're off and not working the graveyard shift, you might want to have different sleep hours than most people. Go to bed early and wake up early. That way, you are getting things as much as possible overlap. So in this schedule here, if you're sleeping from 7 p.m. to midnight when you're working the graveyard shift, and 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. when you're not working, you're sleeping 8 p.m. to midnight. That 8 p.m. to midnight time is an overlap where you're sleeping during that time regardless of whether you're off or working. And that's the kind of thing you want to do, is create as much overlap as you can in your schedules. Working out what you're going to do on your days off and the days that you're working, so that your body is on as much of a regular routine as possible. To conclude, shift work is hard on your body. You want to come up with a lifestyle and routine that has as much overlap as possible with on your days off as the days that you're working. You want to keep as many things regular as possible in your schedule. Use natural light strategically to help your body wake up when you want and go to sleep when you want. You can use nervines, aromatic herbs, which happen to be nervines and relax smooth muscle tissue. You can also be extra gentle on your liver, and I explained more about that in some of our other Ayurvedic routine videos, which you can see that are a part of this playlist. And also, you can take melatonin supplements. You can take a brief nap if you find you're having repeated episodes of microsleep. Take a brief nap, and then when you wake up, have a little cup of coffee. It could even be just a few sips of coffee to stimulate you, so that way you don't get into a car crash or something drastic like that. Also, in the end, because shift work is hard on your body, try to find a different job, or to transition out of it, or find a way of getting your hours to be more regular. And otherwise, do your best with some of those tips that I've mentioned. Thank you. This has been a brief presentation on remedies for shift work, part of our Ayurvedic routine series and playlist, sponsored by the Fundamentals of Ayurvedic Medicine. And Ayurveda considers routine to be essential for happiness, health, and wealth. So a very important topic. Thank you all.